1,000 times more powerful than the computer that we used at MIT when I was an undergraduate. That's a billion-fold increase, and we'll do that again in the next 25 years. So we see that with processing power. We also see it with storage. It's a really funny picture here. This is one of the first disk drives, 5 megabytes being lifted into the side of a jet airplane on a forklift. And now we have 13,000 times that much information that fits on our key drive. And also seeing the same thing in terms of bandwidth. And I think we can all remember when our connections looked a little bit like this. Got the volume?
To AOL and get jiggy with it. Okay, here we go. Jimmy, could you throw this up on the big screen? Disconnected!
Hello?
Mom, get off the phone!
Awesome. So, you know, just in the last 5 or 6 years, we've watched this in all these areas, processing power, disk space, and bandwidth, increased dramatically, and is driving tremendous change in our business. So it's, you know, a lot of what we're talking about is driven this shift from print, TV, and radio to this model that dominated probably from 2003 to 2008, where, you know, all the big ideas happened in the traditional space, TV, print, and radio, and then on the digital marketing side, we would create an accompanying microsite, and then usually drive to that with banners and email and with search, and you know that model dominated for a while. And now it starts to look like this. It's a little chaotic, you know, new channels emerging every day, mobile, social, starting to think a lot more about, you know, digital out of home, interactive TV is, you know, starting to see a lot more momentum around that. And behind this ecosystem, you know, is very complex software and algorithms. More and more, this interconnected ecosystem is becoming this complex system of applications and algorithms. And you know, as we start to think about how we put, you know, communicate with consumers around this environment, we start to think about this balance of utility and storytelling. Some cases, obviously, with TV and radio, we're still using those primarily as storytelling channels. In other cases, there's hybrid. We're starting to see mobile play a much more significant role in bridging traditional and digital channels, bridging the physical and digital worlds. And so, you know, it makes sense then, when you look at that, to integrate those who live and breathe software and utility programmers into your process. So that's what I've been, you know, working on at Crispin over the last, you know, 4 to 5 years, and others in the industry are starting to do the same thing. You're introducing this skill set, this left brain, logical-based skill set, into an environment, you know, that's been, you know, traditionally more right-brained on the creative side. And so, for sure, there was culture clash. This is a diagram that I asked, my wife drew this out of sort of like the geek and the hipster creative. One nice touch here is the geek has the Velcro shoes, which when I first got into the business was astonished by how many software engineers wore Velcro shoes. Don't see quite as much as that, certainly not in the advertising environment. But for sure there was culture clash, you know, and there continues to be, and we're continuing to work through it. You know, technologists think in code, functions and brackets and semicolons. Anyone here come from a coding background, spend any time doing software engineering? Oh, good, cool, excellent. And we think in left brain, logical rule-based constructs, a lot of if-else conditions, or while this is happening, do this, when this is happening, do something else. Think in structured data and APIs, spend a lot of our time thinking about data, and with this data, we search and sort and filter and edit and save, and it's not, you know, super sexy stuff, but if you think about what we do and what we spend our time doing on the web, there's a lot of searching and sorting and filtering, editing and saving. And so, you know, we're bringing a lot of this thinking, this kind of thinking into the traditional advertising environment. So we're relatively new, and you know, as an industry, and you know, certainly at CPB, we've gone through these struggles. Like, what do we call this position? You know, we struggled early on with developers coming in. No one was really sure what we did within the advertising agency. Are we programmers, developers, software engineers? Do we put creative in front of the title? Interactive developers? friend of mine, Stan Weicher, is a really talented engineer. Says we're data processors, which is, again, not the sexiest title in the world, but we are processing a lot of data. And then, you're seeing this title, creative technologist, emerge. So, one way to get a better sense of where this discipline is heading within the industry and what the potential for it is just to take a look through the programmer's bookshelves. And I'll go through a brief history of sort of what's has happened with digital marketing and technology over the last 12 to 15 years. So early days, this is probably 95, 96. I had started at RJ then, was working with Matt, and early days it wasn't necessarily branding work. It was more focused on work that was brochureware oriented, and you're starting to see the beginnings of e-commerce. So for sure, HTML was one of the dominant technologies, the foundations of the web that lets you interlink pages together and create content with visuals and video and put that together pretty quickly. As you started to see the beginnings of e-commerce and things that were more transactional, you had sort of geeky languages like Perl, starting to make their way into the space. And then on the back end, you needed databases to store all of this, product catalogs to drive this more complex functionality. Around 2003, 2004, you started to see advertisers take more interest in the space, started to see a little bit more brand thinking. The technology that dominated, in those years, 2003 to 2008, was Flash. Prior to that, it was very difficult to do anything that was, immersive and experiential. So Flash has its origins as a motion design technology, and grew in terms of capabilities to take on more around video handling capabilities. So it was something that a lot of traditional creatives were sort of gravitated towards because they could do the same kind of storytelling that they're doing in the traditional space and start to do that online. So Flash, drove most of the technology in the space during this microsite heavy era. So then around late 2007 and 2008, we started to see the rise of social media and the rise of this read-write web, where it was no longer just a one-way conversation. We as consumers and participants in the web could contribute to websites. So you saw things like Flickr emerge and YouTube, these places where you could submit your own content, comment on other people's postings, and participate throughout the entire process. So Ajax is a sort of a back-end technology that helps to drive a lot of this heavier application work in the space. Started to see the origins of mashups. I think it was around 2006, 2007. Google came out with Google Maps, and as part of that, they released their APIs to allow outside developers to pull in that functionality into their own sites. And immediately you saw this amazing creative technology explosion of people taking these maps and putting other things onto them. You saw it with places where you could buy houses, taxi cab services. People were doing all sorts of creative things with these APIs. So this gets back to sort of creative thinking around data. I showed that slide earlier. But we do a lot of this. A lot of brands and companies have released their APIs, and we as developers can pull those together to create new experiences. For sure, Facebook has blown up. I think that probably a third of what we do now in the space is on the Facebook platform, and there's very specific technologies that you need to know. You need to know their APIs and how to work on their platform. So a lot more thinking around that. And then just in general, a lot more thinking around social media. If you don't know Groundswell, and it's sort of become the Bible of the social media space, but books like these are starting to make their way onto programmers' bookshelves. And then, looking ahead at where we're going, very much moving into the mobile space. So starting to think about the mobile web. We started measuring mobile web access to our sites about 3 years ago. Back then, it was maybe 1 or 2% of your traffic was coming from the mobile device. Now it's getting to be around 8 or 10. So it can't be an afterthought. For many years, we knew mobile was coming, but you can't ignore it anymore. You can't ignore 10% of your traffic. So we spent a lot of time thinking about mobile-specific interfaces for all the web platforms that we're developing. And then you get into the native app space, and for sure, a lot more focus around iPhone apps, and Android has blown up in the last year. So we're around a third of what we're doing is in mobile, native mobile apps, and when we're doing this, we're generally thinking about the iOS and the Android platforms. And now you're hearing a lot more about HTML5 with Apple's decision not to support Flash on the iPad and the iPhone. The alternative is to use HTML5, the latest iteration of HTML, which gives you Flash-like capabilities. Not quite as powerful yet, but you can do some pretty compelling work with it. So we're starting to think a lot more about that. I'm going to talk in a second about what it means to be designing for the multi-screen experience, and HTML5 plays a very significant role in that. And then, again, much like mobile, we've been talking about connected TV for a long time, for about a decade, maybe a little bit more. Starting to see that emerge, starting to see more talk around Google TV and Apple TV and all of the momentum around Netflix and Hulu. So I think, again, with all this convergence going on between traditional and digital, we're really going to see this come together in the connected TV space. And then another book that's on a lot of our bookshelves is Everywhere by Adam Greenfield. Definitely recommend it. Talks about, again, starts with, covering Moore's Law and what it means as technology gets smaller and faster and starts to diffuse into the environment around us, beyond cell phones into everyday objects like, toasters and everything in our house and into architecture. But just a very compelling read and some pretty significant insights of what's ahead. So this is where it starts to get a little bit interesting, and this has been one of the things I've really enjoyed about being at Crispin in the traditional space is learning about what goes on in in traditional advertising and how the processes work. And so over the last couple of years and with programs like BDW, there's been a lot of talk around educating traditional people on digital, but I think that the education has to go the other way as well. And so we've been making a significant point to teach our digital folks and our programmers the sort of the core tenets of traditional advertising. So starting to see books like this, Ogilvy on advertising, programmers are going through things like this, starting to learn more about the media space, starting to learn more about planning, Truth, Lies, and Advertising, a great book on strategy and planning. And then on the creative concepting side, as we see folks, from the UX and from the technology side, moving to concepting, starting to teach folks about how to, make advertising ideas that are on brand. So Luke Sullivan's book, Hey, Whipple Squeeze This, is starting to make its way through the programming team, and then another great book, the Advertising Concepting book by Pete Barry. So again, we're making a significant push to get digital folks to understand the core themes and tenets of what drives traditional brand concepting. So back to titles. For this role, the industry over the last 12 to 18 months has rallied around this title, Creative Technologist. And I think it works pretty well. Technologist can be a little bit vague, but top there's a good blog posting that's been referenced by a number of people. Mark Abnett runs the Creative Technology program at the VCU Ad Center, and a really great blog posting with tons of comments about what this role is and what it does within the agency and the potential for it. But his title there is What the Heck is a Creative Technologist? Starting to see some job postings now for it. This is from the FWA, March 9th, a company looking for a creative technologist, and then another blog posting from the folks at Wunderman just talking about this new role. So a lot of discussion out there, a lot of folks talking about where this role fits in the agency. Is it a creative discipline? Is it an executional discipline? Is it both? And some really good conversation. I'd love to hear feedback from from others here to see how it's working within your agency. So I'm going to dive in a little bit deeper on the role that the creative technologist plays. This is coming from our experience. I know other folks have had different types of experiences. Just to give folks a sense of the role that technology plays at CPB, when we started in 2006, we put technologists in the creative department. And so we've been part of the creative process. We're part of the creative concepting process from start to finish. And right now, I think we're around 1,200 globally, and 100 of those folks are coders. And I think that percentage is going to continue to increase. So key, we've seen a couple of slides from the earlier presentations about just the new team structure. Key here is that the creative technologist is not just someone who you hand stuff to late in the process just to build out. It's important that you have this creative technologist as part of your key digital leadership team, which is partnered there with a copywriter, with a creative director, an experienced designer, and a producer. This is critical. And early on, 2006, 2007, a big part of what we're doing is educating folks about this new team structure that combines traditional and digital disciplines. So, first and probably most importantly, the creative